Great. Okay, I'll start sharing the screen. Okay. So this is just sort of like a casual intro to Bookdown, very chill. So feel free to stop me anytime. I don't know how you guys usually do questions, but I don't mind being interrupted to answer questions. So we can totally do that, chat however you guys want to handle that. Cool. Okay. So I'll start like any good talk with my outline. So generally speaking, we're going to talk about why are we using Bookdown? What it assumes about you, basically the knowledge that you need to have to use Bookdown. We'll sort of do a live demo of sort of making your first book with Bookdown. And then we'll get into some what I call tricky little bits. So things that are a little bit fiddly and might take you a while to figure out if you didn't have them sort of side by side in a slide deck. And then we'll talk about LaTeX versus Bookdown. So the LaTeX, if you're unfamiliar, is sort of like the traditional, like how you would write a math paper, or, you know, it's how I wrote parts of my dissertation. And so then how can you translate that over to Bookdown? And actually Bookdown was sort of just starting to be like very developed when I was working on my dissertation. And so I recently, or not recently, I guess it was 3 years ago now, but I gave a talk in 2018 after I had finished my dissertation on how to write your dissertation in Bookdown. But I didn't actually write my dissertation in Bookdown because it wasn't quite there yet. So I was doing, you know, RNW and Sweeve and LaTeX and all of that. So if you understood that, great. If you didn't, that's fine. You didn't really need to. But yeah, so yeah, quick disclaimer you can see here at the bottom. This talk is very, very similar to the one I gave in 2018. And so I tried to catch all the changes in Bookdown since there were at least 2, I think, that I found. But I may have missed a couple. So, you know, always refer to the actual Bookdown site for the current Bookdown syntax.
Lady, turn off your mic.
Okay. So I'll go ahead and get started here. So first, why Bookdown, right? So Yue, who wrote the Bookdown package, has a very nice blog post, which I've linked here in the slides, sort of why, you know, what's the motivation behind this package, why use it, and sort of what like the ideal version of a book is, and why that motivated the writing of the package. And so a book should be easy to write. It should be cheap, which we know if you went to college, they're usually not cheap. It should be dynamic, meaning it should be able to be changed, quickly edited, and re-released. So if you find a mistake, you know, you can fix that and, you know, re-release the most updated version. And it can be authored by a few people, but edited or reviewed or contributed to by many people. So basically, you know, a few people have the bulk of the responsibility, but, you know, if anybody finds a typo or a error in a formula or anything like that, or has another example they want to provide, they can contribute that pretty easily. So those are sort of the motivating factors behind Bookdown. And it's pretty like mind-blowing, right? This is why I have the mind-blowing gif of like, wow, like I never realized before this that like books actually can have these properties, you know? So I think that's a really cool, and if you have the time, I definitely suggest checking out the post by Yue. It's really good. So another reason why Bookdown is that if you want to write a book and you're already familiar with our studio, then you're pretty much set, right? You don't need to install any other software other than, you know, install.packages Bookdown. And you can write in Markdown, which is, if you don't know it already, it's a very lightweight markup language. It's super easy to learn. and you can knit to HTML or to PDF. And if you want to do PDF, you can avoid sort of all of the MikTeX annoying stuff that you have to deal with. If you've ever had to sort of make a PDF in LaTeX, that can get really annoying and frustrating. And then you can generate the figures and tables in the book directly and place them in line where you want them to go in the book. And there's no like copying, pasting, or having like all these different directories and exporting graphs and anything like that. So that's really nice. So that's sort of the motivation behind why Bookdown. And then I'll sort of get into the next piece, which is what Bookdown assumes about you. So in order to use it, you do have to sort of have some background knowledge, and I'll sort of go into some of that. And I have some links in here. And I'll give the links to the slide at the end. But yeah, there's all these links in there that if you need a little bit of help on something, you can go to those links. So the first thing is that assumes you know how to use R and RStudio. So you know how to install packages, you know how to use code chunks in an RMD file, you know how to render plots from code in an RMD file. And you don't necessarily have to use RStudio, or you don't even have to want to use RStudio, but it is very, very helpful, and I will be using it in my live demo. And I will say that if you don't want to use RStudio, I kind of assume that you have the knowledge of like enough about how like the console and everything works, so that you don't really need the help of RStudio. Because what RStudio is doing is it's sort of, wrapping some GUIs around some console functions that are, that if you don't ever use RStudio and you're like, I must only use the console, I sort of assume you already have that knowledge of how to do that and you can figure that out pretty easily. So again, I'm going to focus on using RStudio. And so then, again, so if you're seeing this talk, if you're here, this talk is going to assume that you have at least a minimal working knowledge of R and RStudio. And so if you don't and I lose you, I'm sorry, but sort of that's the baseline here. Okay, the next part is Markdown. So Bookdown assumes that you are comfortable writing in Markdown. So that means you can make headers, you can do tables, you can format all your fonts in all the different ways, you can insert horizontal lines, all of that. And there's a handy dandy R Markdown reference guide, which I do actually think is built into RStudio. And then there's a cheat sheet as well. So you can just visit one of those links if you need to know something about Markdown. But the nice thing about Bookdown is that you can just start typing and it'll probably look fine. So you don't really have to worry about that too much. Next, it assumes that you know how to work with bibliography files or .bib files. So that's something called BibTeX, which is sort of a LaTeX cousin. And if you don't want to write references or you don't want to do inline citations, then you can just ignore this part totally. But if you do have a bibliography and you do want to do inline citations, then you will have to sort of know a little bit about BibTeX and sort of how it works. And I'll provide some of that, like the tricky bits. I'll provide some reference stuff on how to do that. But again, because this is just sort of like a very high level introduction, I'm not going to focus too much on this, but again, there's a couple of links as sort of, if you're unfamiliar with BibTeX, to sort of like familiarize yourself with it if you need it. Okay. Finally, it assumes you know how to write math things, assuming that you are going to write math things, and you know the LaTeX syntax. So I linked the wiki book for LaTeX here. Yeah, so if you want to know how to write something in math in LaTeX, go to that link, and you should be able to find it. So again, this is assuming that you are already a little bit aware about how to write math with LaTeX, and I probably won't go too much into the LaTeX side of things or the math side of things, again, because it's a very short introduction or a very high level introduction to Bookdown. But yeah, if you have any questions about that, I'm more than happy to answer those sort of at the end, I guess. Okay, so this is how you would go about making your first book in Bookdown. So I sort of told you like the background knowledge you need to have, right? And now we're just gonna jump right into it, right? It's learn by doing. So this is my preferred way of doing things. So you go File, New Project, and then this window comes up in our studio and you do New Directory and you select Book Project. You have to scroll down a little bit. You select Book Project using Bookdown and then name the folder something and choose a subdirectory and then click Create Project and you're done. So let's do it, right? This is what you get when you're done with that process when you click Create Project. And so we'll go ahead and we'll do that now. So let me pull our studio over here. I actually think I may have to stop sharing and reshare. Hold on. While I'm doing that, are there any questions? No, okay, cool. So you should all hopefully be seeing my screen. Can somebody tell me if I need to make the font bigger?
I think it looks
maybe
good.
a little bigger.
Okay, yeah.
A little bit bigger? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. How's that?
Oh, that's a lot better. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, that's
great.
good.
Cool. Awesome. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make my new book. And so I'll go File, New Project, and New Directory. Okay. And so because this is my work computer, so there's a whole thing where I was going to use my personal computer and now I'm on my work computer. Okay, so we have to take a couple steps back because I don't have Bookdown installed. So this is even better. We're starting from like absolutely nothing. So I'll do install.packages, Bookdown. Okay, great. And so now I'm going to just restart our studio. So I will just quit and I will restart. And then I will reshare. Cool. And so now I should be able to do new project, new directory, book project using Bookdown. There we go. So I'll go ahead and click that. I'm going to pick where I want it to live. We'll put it here. And we will call it my first book. And then you're going to want to select the HTML format get book. That's just the one I've always used. I don't know a whole lot about using the other one, so beware. I'm sure it's great though. It's just not the one I've used before. Okay, so here's what it looks like. You sort of have all your files that it comes with standard. And then there's like a nice little README that tells you this is a Bookdown book. Here's the skeleton file structure. You have some pointers to help you get started. And then it links you to the additional resources. So this is the site that I mentioned initially, just to make sure if there's something that I did that wasn't right, make sure you're referencing that site instead, because that's the actual Bookdown site. And then, or the actual Bookdown book that tells you everything you need to know and is most up to date and won't have any of my typos from 2018. And then this is the actual Bookdown package. So any reference material is going to be in there. Okay, so let's kind of get started. There's a lot going on here. So what are we looking at? The first thing that we're going to look at is this index. So this is your sort of like your first page of your book, pretty much. And so you can see there's all of this YAML content at the front. So that's going to be where you edit like how you want it to turn into a website, what the document class is going to be, if you have any bibliography files, If you want like an image to share along with your book, if there's a GitHub repo associated with it, anything like that. So there's tons and tons of these YAML options. Again, sort of that's more of an advanced topic, and so I won't go into all of those, but basically what we'll do is we will just change the title. And if you were here right at the beginning, you saw my dog. His name is Archie. We just got him on the 14th of January. He's brand new. He's only about 10 weeks old. He's a little puppy. And so I'm just going to make this book be about Archie. So Archie's first month with his new humans. And so I'll put my name and then the date. And I'm not going to change anything else right now. And so I'll hit save and we'll sort of see what that looks like. In order to do that, what we're going to want to do is go over to the build tab. So next to the environment, there should be a build tab when you do it this way. And then you can just click build book. And so that will show you what the book looks like when it's rendered. Okay, can you see that or no? Do I need to change how I'm sharing?
I don't see an output.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'll
we
change
can't
how
see
I
it because it's in a separate.
Gotcha. Okay. I'll just share my whole desktop. Here we go.
We also have a question in the chat on what to do if you don't see a build tab.
Okay.
That just means that it's not fully installed or.
Yeah. So if you do it the way I just did it, where you have the package installed, you do file, new project, new book with Bookdown, that should not happen. The scenario where that might happen is if you have, oh, okay. Yeah, somebody said it might be in a different place on the screen. So that's right. So I have my my sort of windows configured a little bit differently. So it may be, you may have chosen to put it over here or up here or over here. But yeah, so basically this is the build. So if you don't have the build tab, something's gone wrong, especially if you did it the way I did it. You should not have that issue. So I don't think you'll ever find yourself in that scenario. You may if you tried to create a book in some other way. And I think there's a file in here that is sort of dictating like how it's being built, which is going to be this output YAML file. So this is everything about how you're going to render the book. And so it may have something to do with the options in that file, or you may be missing that file. So something to do with that, or it just may be in a different place, either up here or next to the console or next to environment. So just depending on your RStudio configurations. Oh, cool, you found it, awesome. Cool, so yeah, okay, so let's sort of take a look at what we've got here. I'm gonna hide the table of contents for now. So this is the title that I made. There's my name as the author, and there's the date that we put in. And then we start right off with chapter 1. And so we can kind of see sort of how we're matching up with this. So we can sort of look at the Markdown side by side. So let's see. So we'll scroll down and you can see sort of about, and you can see this automatically renders a chapter 1. So this 1 hash is a header level 1. And so that's automatically going to tell you, okay, this is the highest level. So that's a new chapter. So 1 hash is a new chapter. And then you can sort of see here's some math, here's some Markdown stuff happening. And then a subsection is 2 hashes. And then you can see, what section 1.1. And we can, sort of go down here. And here's some of the stuff that I'm already saying. A chapter has to start with a first level heading, and can have only one first level heading in it, things like that. So this is important to note. The index file that we're in right now, this file is required. So you have to have a file called index or else your book will not render. And it's also the first book chapter. So this is sort of like the homepage file when you render the book. So that's to tie it to the web, right? So the index page is the default page. That's why it's called index.rmd. Okay. And so then let's talk about rendering a little bit. So we saw the one way to render, which was find the build tab, wherever that is in your RStudio instance. I think probably for most people, it'll be up here on the top right tab, or top right window, because I sort of have reconfigured mine a little bit. And so, yeah, so the build tab, and then you just click build book, and that's how you render. Easy peasy. Okay. There's other ways to do it in the console. And one thing we might do if we are editing just one file, we might want to say, I don't want to build the whole book because that's going to take too long. I'm just editing this first chapter. And so I only want to look at the first chapter. And so what I might say is preview, let's see, Bookdown. And then there's a function called preview chapter. And then you can just give it the file that you're editing, and then it should be able to render that. And I don't know where it is. Index.html. Where did it go? That should have worked. I don't know why it didn't. Maybe let's try another one. Maybe I just missed the window popping up somewhere. Or it's not popping up for me and I just have to go in manually and look for it. So this is how you would look at just one file. So you actually have to go in and search. Sorry, I thought it would just pop up. My bad.
Also, Sam, there's a question in the
Oh, yeah.
So Michelle asks, she says her Bookdown project files look different. Is there a GitHub repo with the index, readme, etc. files the way that they're set up here?
Oh, is there a GitHub repo? Yes, I think so. That's a good question. There should be. So I think it's right there, right? No.
But yeah, wasn't this just was this the default file structure?
Yeah, this is the default file structure that gets created when you sort of do it in that way of file, new project, new book from Bookdown, etc. But it looks like this is the GitHub repo. So let me see if I can go to Google and view that. Okay, so this looks like the URL. I think this looks very similar. So I'll go ahead and see if I can paste this in the chat. So that should be, oh yeah, somebody else already did it. Yeah, maybe, yeah, that's a good point, Michelle. You may have an older version of the Bookdown package or of RStudio, or yeah, that would affect it for sure. Okay. So let's take a look now at some of the other files that we're sort of looking at. So one of them, so this would be our next chapter here. And so you'll notice the naming convention. So you want to, they'll get rendered in this order. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so on. So that's how you want to name your files so that they're rendered in the correct order. And you can see that unlike the index file, which starts with this huge YAML header, every other chapter just starts with the chapter name. And so let's go ahead and build the book again, and then we can sort of take a look at what gets rendered from the first chapter. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and hide this. Okay, so this is now chapter 2, which is kind of confusing because this is file 01, but it's actually chapter 2. So just be careful with that. And so then you can see that everything is going to start with chapter and then whatever chapter it is. And then that's where you get into your title. So the title of this chapter is Hello Bookdown. And then again, you can see the same thing with different subsections, and all of this numbering is happening automatically. And then if you want to do an unnumbered section, which we'll do in a second, you can add this little sort of shortcut at the end of the heading to sort of say, okay, don't put a number on this. So what we might want to do in that case is we'll take that little brackets with a dash in between, and we'll move that over here to the about. And so we'll do the little brackets with the dash in between, and then we'll rebuild the book. And so now you can see that this now doesn't start with any heading, right? And so now this is chapter 0. And so what I might want to do is I might want to also add the minus at the end of all these other ones. But now when we go to the next chapter, it's chapter 1 and it matches 01-intro, right? So that may be something you want to do. In my book that I have written, I did this with like my first chapter is just a preface, and then you move on to chapter 1 in the next page. So that's sort of a nice way to, or like an introduction or something like that. So that's sort of how that's used. Okay, so let's see, anything else? And then oh, I'm seeing a question. Is the next page portions different RMD? Oh, I'm not sure I understand what that means. You mean like the arrows?
Yeah, the arrows. Like when you say next, is that within the middle of an RMD, or is that like different RMD files?
Oh, yes, good question. So yeah, so because of how, yes, because of how it's structured, so each chapter is a different RMD file. Yes, so then we'll go over here to chapter 2 cross-references, and we can see in our directory, we have chapter 2 cross-references file right here. So because of how Bookdown works, you have to do chapters in separate Markdown documents, and they have to start with that single hash mark and then the chapter name.
Great, thanks.
Yep. Sorry, I didn't understand that. It's been a long day. Okay. And then as you can see, you can do all sorts of other things, like making numbered lists and unnumbered lists. This is all just in Markdown. You can link to things, you can make references, you can do plots. So all of that stuff is really nice. And I'll sort of get into that into the tricky bits. So all of these are just other chapters. And so this is sort of a trick, is the references. Oh, sorry, I have this Apple mouse that's like crazy sensitive and it just jumps around all the time. So anyway, so the reference page, this is how you would like automatically generate your reference page so that you don't have to worry about like listing everything in alphabetical order. It'll just do it for you. So this, you won't need to ever add anything else to this reference page or to this reference chapter. Yeah, and so you can sort of just see here, like everything, it's all written in Markdown. If you want to, insert a link, you can just insert it. If you want to do like verbatim code, you can do that between the backticks in line. Yeah, if you want to put some code, you can do that. yeah, just lots of different things. And so that's all Markdown. So that's sort of what's your Bookdown is sort of assuming you already know how to do. How is the references chapter populated if you do not edit it? So it's that little bit of code. So it just automatically creates it. And so what you're going to have in one of these files is your citation. So this is going to tell you how you do your citations. And it will just, by default, if you have a page called references, it will just create it by default. So then I guess we'll switch into then references, how you would do that, because that is a little bit trickier. So let's say you have a reference that you want to use. So this is a reference to this book, Dynamic Documents with R.N. Knitter by Yue, the author of the package. And so this is what's called a BibTeX entry. And this right here is what's called the reference or the ID or something like that. So this is how you identify a reference. And so all of your references are going to look like this. And then anytime that you use a reference in the text, it'll automatically generate a nicely formatted, bibliography entry, and then I'll just put that in the references. That just all happens for free. You don't even have to think about it. Yeah. Okay. Do all your chapters have to start with XX dash, where XX is the number? Any other big format requirements? So you can actually change how you start your chapters, if I'm understanding this question correctly. If you go over to the bookdown.yaml file, you can sort of see what the chapter name looks like. So this, if we were to remove this, it would just start with the number itself. So you could change this to nothing, and then the word chapter would disappear from our book. So let's do that. Jeez. Oh, I see. I misunderstood the question. I'm having some brain issues today. But yeah, so now you can see that since we got rid of that, it doesn't start with chapter 1. It starts with just the number 1. So let me add that back in because that was not actually the question.
Yeah, don't worry about it. I mean, this is also helpful. I was just gonna try.
Yeah, so what's gonna happen is it's going to render in the order, like in alphabetical order.
Okay.
So basically that you do this so that it forces the ordering that you want.
Right.
And like, you don't have to do it with an O1. You could do like A, B, C, whatever.
Yeah, I know this feels like the Jenny Bryan preferred way of doing that. So
yeah, I mean, like, this is the way that it comes by default. So like, I'm not gonna mess with it, but yeah, you could change it if you needed to.
Yeah, so I guess if you're writing like an encyclopedia, you could have like 3 digits or something. But
right, yeah. And that's why they start with 0, right? So that it actually goes 0, 1, 0, 2, and not like 1 and then 10 or something, right? Yeah, cool. So I'll actually do another thing, and I haven't actually tried this in a while. So let's see if this works. Section name, and we'll add so that all of our subsections have the word section in front of them. So let's try that. Chapter 1, a section. Oh, it didn't do that. Okay. Maybe it's subsection name. Sorry, you know how live demos are. Just kind of try stuff. Nope, it didn't like that. Okay, well, if you figure that out, you'll know more than me. Cool. So we'll just ditch that because it didn't work. So I think that's sort of everything I wanted to go over sort of in this structure. So actually, the actual book itself lives in this folder _book. I guess that this is the last thing. And so don't ever touch this file. Don't ever edit anything in this file or in this folder rather. Just edit the stuff that's at the top level, and all of this other stuff is generated automatically. So don't be going around messing in _book or _bookdown files. So just edit the files that are in the top level directory. Okay, I think I'm going to go back to my slides unless there are any like sort of last minute questions while I'm still in our studio.
I had a question about the bib file.
Oh yeah.
So am I right in thinking that this is just a standard file format that, like, if you use Mendeley or Zotero, then you can just export
Yep,
like
yep,
all of your
exactly.
references and then they're in that file? And then also, is there a special command? So like when you're writing the actual text that you like plug in that reference, then like what does that look like? Or are you going to show that in the slides?
I will show that in the slides. Yep.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Thank you.
But yeah, you're exactly right that yeah, it's just sort of any software you use that has a citation exporter, you're going to be able to get the .bib format easily. And then the only thing you really need to change is this little key right here. So that's how you reference it internally, right? Okay, so let's go back to the slides. How do I switch tabs when I'm like this? Hold on. Okay. Okay, so hey, that wasn't that bad, right? We didn't do that much grimacing. So now we'll sort of get into these like tricky little things so that you guys have a quick reference to do things exactly like how do you cite stuff. So first, just to note, you notice that when I was in our studio, I never clicked the knit button to render a chapter. So you don't ever or use that preview chapter. Oh, sorry, my stupid Apple mouse. Or use that function to preview the single chapter. And so you can click the build book button. That's what I do. You can do render book, or you can do serve book. So that's actually kind of cool. Let's demo that. Because then what you'll get is a sort of what it looks like in HTML, right, side by side. And so then you can kind of have this thing over here where you're editing. And let's look at the index. And then we'll just do that. And then it should update automatically. So now you can see that number is gone. So this is nice because you can sort of make a change and right away you can see the updates to it with that serve book function. So that, again, that's this serve book, and that will render it in the viewer pane. Gosh, I'm so sorry, my stupid Apple mouse. Yeah, and so then, yeah, so basically the moral of this slide is don't click knit because you will create chaos if you do, and you just don't want to get into that headache. Okay, so the next sort of tricky bit is with the math mode. So sometimes if you're familiar with LaTeX, you have to like enter math mode, right? And this is usually like $$ or $2 signs, or, you know, backslash parenthesis, close, you know, backslash parenthesis. And sometimes you need it in our Markdown or in Bookdown, and sometimes you don't. So in a situation where you might need math mode, you would do like this equation right here, which is a display version of, you know, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, right? And so you have it wrapped in these $ signs so that it renders, because without the $ signs, it would just render sort of verbatim, right? And then you don't need the math mode when you're using any sort of begin and end things. So like you can have an equation, you could have a matrix, you could have an equation array, anything like that. If it says begin equation, end equation, any equations, you're not going to need math mode. So don't put it in math mode. So this is kind of tricky. And it looks like there's a comment. Not sure if this is just me, but serve book gave me an error no file found. Okay. I wonder if maybe you don't have the right dependency package installed. I'm not sure. We can troubleshoot that at the end if we have time. Okay. Another tricky thing is inserting images. So if you're familiar with Markdown, there's this sort of nice shortcut, which is just exclamation point, and then it's not actually the caption, it's the alt text, and then the path to the image. But in my experience and in my knowledge, you can't number the figures this way like you would in a book. You can't reference figures in this way like you would in a book, and you can't align the figures in any way unless you want to get into some HTML. And so instead, what you want to do, instead what you're going to want to do is do the knitter include graphics function. So that's a function that is really handy. So you're going to use that inside an R code chunk to insert your image instead of doing this like Markdown shortcut. So why are you going to do that? So you get figure naming, figure referencing, and numbering sort of like for free. So if you wanted to reference a figure, what you would do is you would do backslash, the @ symbol, ref, parenthesis, fig : chunk name, close parenthesis. And that's a reference to that specific figure. And so you want to make sure you're naming your code chunks where you generate those figures, so that you can reference them back. Remember, because everything is being inserted in an R code chunk. So make sure you're naming those appropriately. And then, of course, you can, because the chunk has so many options, you can control it, the size, how it's aligned, you can put a caption, all of that stuff, very easy to do. So here's an example. So this is what I would do to include this GIF. So I use this knitter include graphics like that. And I have eval false there. That's a typo, sorry. Ignore that. And then inside of this, instead of this eval false, I would have the chunk options fig.height = 2. That's just kind of a random how tall I want it to be. Fig.align = center, so that it's centered in the place where I'm putting it on the page. And then this is my caption. And then I don't want the code to appear above it. I just want the image to appear above it. And so then that's what you get when you insert the image this way. And so it's nice that you can have all of these control options over it. And I love this. And did you know, this is a fun Ted Lasso fact that Walt Whitman did not say that. I don't know. I always thought that was funny that he said it was a Walt Whitman quote, and it's not Walt Whitman at all. Okay, again with the silly apple mouse. Oh, here's an interesting question. Would you use this code for inserting flowcharts created with Diagrammer? If it's an image, like if what, I don't have any experience with Diagrammer, but if whatever you're creating is an image and Diagrammer creates an image, then the answer is yes. So as long as it's in any type of image file that gets output from that, then you can do that. I hope that answers that question. Okay, so next thing you want to do is you want to insert a table, right? So you want to have your table of results, whatever in your book. And so you can do it, again, the usual Markdown way, which involves lots of like pipes and then like colons and like making sure you have the right number of dashes to make sure everything's aligned, right? But, you know, again, you have the same sort of issues, right? Numbering is hard, captions are impossible, referencing is impossible, alignment is hard, like all of these things are hard or impossible, right? And so instead what you want to do is, again, there's a handy dandy knitter function because UA, again, has thought of everything. And you do this knitter cable function to create a table. So cable is a knitter table. And so then again, you get some nice things like naming, referencing, numbering, and these are all included for free, right? And so again, because we're making a table, and you can see this is the same as the reference for the figure. And the only thing that's different is, you know, this is tab for table and fig for figure. And then obviously the chunk name is going to change. So you just do the backslash @ ref, parenthesis, tab, colon, chunk name, parenthesis for any of your table references. Again, you can, there's a caption argument inside of the cable function, so you can write the caption that way, and it'll show up in the exact right place every time with the number pre-appended to it. And then you get all of the other like good stuff from LaTeX, if there is such a thing, right? So you can have like a long table, you can do like you can control the significant digits, things like that. All of those options are built in within the knitr function, and so you can control all of those things that you would control normally with like LaTeX. You can do it with the cable function. So here's an example. And so again, this is the code that I would put in my code chunk. And you can see here that I did actually name it this time, which I failed to do last time. So I wouldn't have been able to reference that figure. But basically, here's my data. Here's my caption. And then, excuse me. And then, oh gosh. Oh man, it's a good thing my partner brought me tea earlier. Hold on a second. Okay. Sorry, where was I? Okay, so this is how you make your table. So there's arguments like caption and then format. And then inside of the chunk, if you do results equals as is, then it's going to render beautifully for you, just like this, in your table. And you can see that here's the caption. And then if you were doing figure numbering, and you did all of the right referencing things and you named everything correctly, then there would be a figure number here in front of it as well. But this is not in Bookdown itself, so it doesn't match that perfectly. Okay, so finally, LaTeX versus Bookdown. So what are some of the things that you can do in LaTeX that you can also do in Bookdown? And this is where we're going to get into your referencing of your inline citations. So, right. So sort of, this is like a side-by-side. If you're not familiar with LaTeX, just totally ignore the left side of the screen. You don't need to look at that at all. But this is sort of, if you are familiar with it and you want to switch from using LaTeX to using Bookdown, this is sort of what you would do. Okay, so you can label sections, so you can refer back to sections or back to chapters. You can do inline citations, and then the figure and table references we already talked about a little bit. And then you can also label equations. And so the labeling the sections, you just place, something like this in those little brackets, again, after sort of, hash section name. And then this is how you would refer to them, was just at ref parentheses, and then the label that you have. And then inline citations, which is what you were asking about earlier. I think that was Rachel, right? And you can do at bib label. So like the bib label is that little chunk at the top of the bib file. Let's see, where is that? So that's this. So this is the little label. So if I wanted to cite this book, I would just do, and I'll just sort of type it over here in the console. I just do at G 2015, and then that would reference it for me. So that would render it in line exactly as is, and then the one in brackets just renders it with parentheses around it. So if you want to do it like at the end of the sentence, and then the LaTeX alternatives or versions of that are cite T and cite P. At least those are the ones that I've used. Yeah, and then the equation one is interesting because you have to like put it in a very specific place when you're labeling it. You have to put it in the line right above the line where you say \end equation. So that's just a little tricky thing. You can also do like theorems and proofs, like how you would do in a LaTeX book. So there's these like little, I'm calling them like code chunks and quotes, but basically it's this special syntax where you start with 3 colons and then bracket, and then the type of environment you want to do. So this is a theorem environment. And then, oh, Jesus. And then you would do the name of your theorem here. So this is how you would reference it with like hash my theorem. And that's how I would reference it. And then there's also an option called name where you can actually name it. So it'll say like theorem 1.2 and then like my theorem, and then it'll have the statement of the theorem. And then this is the statement of the theorem in here, and it can contain any sort of markdown syntax. And then you end it with these 3 colons. And so then if you wanted to reference it, you would say \@ref, like theorem, and then my theorem. So theorem is THM, and then my label here is my theorem. So this would be my theorem. Couple questions it looks like. Would you also recommend the cable extra package for extra special cable options? Yes, I would. Yes, I would, is a short answer to that. That's a good package to use. And then the other question is, where could we change the bibliography style? Oh, yes, good question. So that is going to be back here. That's going to be in your output. And that's exactly this line that was highlighted. Wow, I must have had like a premonition or something. And so this is the how you're going to do it and how you're going to change the style. And I think that that gets rendered somehow in here, but I don't know off the top of my head. Oh, it's probably in the style file actually. Somewhere. Oh, maybe not. But yeah, this is how you would change that. There's different citation packages you can use. So the one that this is currently using is just called NatBib. But yeah, there's other ones. I don't remember them for like what it's called for APA or Chicago, but you can look that up pretty easily. Okay. And then there's also lots of customization that you can do, right? One of the advantages of LaTeX is that it's super customizable, and so is Bookdown. It's much more customizable than like your typical like RMD or your typical file that you would make with like our code chunks. So there's various like this like block environment, which is like very similar to the way Theorem works. So you got to get into CSS a little bit. So there's a link here to sort of instructions by UA of like how you would create a custom format. And then there's, and then it works exactly like how Theorem would work. That's how you would reference it, how you would name it, and so on. So you can do lots of different things. Like if you want to say like warning, this is under development, then you would have a warning block that you would create. There's lots of examples of that in the Bookdown book itself. And then here's some other random Bookdown facts that I like. You can do different parts and appendix headers for separating different groups of chapters. So if you want to have like a section that's just like, you know, like introduction, and then there's several chapters, and then there's like, I don't know, linear models, and then there's several other chapters, right? You can do all sorts of different sections, and then you can create custom like appendices and how those are formatted as well. I'm not sure what this means. Oh yeah, you can reference text instead of just referencing like a theorem or a figure or a table. You can actually reference like a chunk of text. And so that way, what you might want to do is like, say you have like a sentence in your paper that you are describing the figure in, and then you can just sort of reference that sentence and make that the figure caption in the table. So that's an example of how you might use that. Oh gosh, sorry. Okay, so you can also put an entire web page inside of a book. So this might be, say you're writing like a really cool like introduction to R, you know, or introduction to stats book or something like that. And you want to have a Shiny app do some like simulations or something like that. And you can embed that in the online version of your book, and then people can read the book and interact with the Shiny app that you've written in the same page. So that's a really cool example. You can just put a whole website, which is, you know, inside of your book, which is pretty neat. Okay, and so that's it for me. You can follow me all of these places at SC Tyner, and you can follow my dog at archie.dmv on Instagram. If you want to see really cute pictures of my, oh, I spelled it wrong, archie.dmv. Yeah. And yeah, so any questions, comments, anything like that, I think I'm good to go. But yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Thank you so much. That was really awesome. And I'm really looking forward to playing with this. Does anyone have any last questions for Sam? Including questions about Archie? Like, what kind of dog is he?
He is a miniature dachshund.
That's what I thought, but I couldn't quite tell.
Yeah, we think he's like, it doesn't quite say on his like birth certificate or whatever, but we think he's a half long haired and half like short haired. And so he's got like these like really floofy ears that are really, really cute.
That's amazing. All right, great. Well, please follow Sam and reach out to her if you have any other questions. Oh, wait, we have a question for a PhD thesis. Where is the document type to be?
Oh, do you mean like knitting it to a PDF instead of, or rendering a PDF instead of, that's what I'm going to take that to mean. So the easy way to do that is to do this and just change how it's being built. So you just go to the build book button that you clicked before, and then you click this little button and you click PDF book instead. And then I think you should see this popped up. So now it looks like your very nice LaTeX rendered book with all of the LaTeX things in it, and you know, your typical contents and all of that. You can see that there's still like code and everything in here too, and figures and all of that. And so it looks exactly like how it would if you wrote everything in LaTeX, but you didn't have to waste your time doing that and didn't have to have that headache. So I'll sort of add a bonus thing onto that for the like a PhD thesis type of thing. So you're probably going to have like some sort of like fancy, like very specific to your university, like LaTeX file. So I'll drop, actually, there's a version of this that I have for ISU where I went. Oh my God, sorry if anybody just saw all of that just flash by. So I'll drop that link. Oh, and let me drop the link to these slides too, but while I'm thinking about it. So here's the link to these slides. And then I know I have like an ISU. Let me find this really quickly. Oh, here it is. Okay. So this then is an example of a thesis. So you may be able to get some help from there. Again, you can see it hasn't been edited in about 3 years. So again, some issues there with it being out of date. But yeah, so that might help you out if you're doing some thesis stuff.
Great. Yeah, that seems like a great place to start. Nice.
You're welcome.
Oh my gosh.
He had his first like wellness vet checkup today. And so that's my partner holding him at the vet. Very cute. Anyways.
Oh, so good. All right. Well, with that, I just want to thank you again, Sam, for a really great talk, and thank you to everyone who came today for spending time with us. And do you want to say anything else, Margaret, before we head
No,
off?
just thanks so much, Sam. That was an awesome presentation. And yeah, thanks everybody for coming. It was fun to do this joint meetup with the Our Ladies DC folks. We should do this more often. It's nice to see some familiar
Yeah.
faces.
Definitely.
All right, great. Well, everyone have a wonderful night, and hopefully